Watching our special coverage of Budget 2025, magic bullet for middle class. Well, that is what our question was in the run-up to Budget 2025, and yeah, no longer a question mark. I think it's fairly clear that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has delivered indeed a magic bullet for the middle class by way of the change in tax slabs and no taxes for salary up to 12 lakh rupees. But that's not all. The budget is not just about income taxes. The budget is also about growth and GDP projections, manufacturing, job creation, agriculture, and a lot more. So let's deconstruct all of this to begin with. Of course, the tax story, and thereafter a lot more with none other than Dr. Arvind Virmani, Member NITI Aayog, joining us on News 9 Live. Dr. Virmani, it's a pleasure having you back right here on News 9. And let me begin first by asking you the most obvious question, which is top of mind for everybody, is that the Finance Minister has indeed delivered a bonanza for the middle class by way of exempting taxes up to 12 lakh rupees and an incremental advantage in saving taxes even for the higher income bracket by up to 1.1 lakh rupees per annum. My first question to you, and a fairly direct, simple one, Dr. Virmani, the tax cut will eventually lead to a consumption boost. I want you to help explain to me and our viewers, how much is that multiplier on consumption boost and how would that indeed lead to GDP growth, sir?
So let me start briefly with the background and then the impact.
Okay.
The background, there's two things. One is that as we saw last year, the latest GCCs survey, that poverty as has been measured for 50 years is virtually gone. So what we are left with is pockets of poverty, plus everybody else is in a sense in the lower middle class. There is of course 20% of those people who are still vulnerable, but they can kind of be considered lower middle class. So that is one part of the background, that as the Prime Minister said, we have to start thinking of both the poor and the middle class, which is really the lower and middle if you call it. So that is one thing. The second is that in a way the formal labor force, which is part which pays the income tax, the inflation rate that they have faced has been the increase in nominal wages is not as high as the inflation, and therefore in some sense their real wages have been getting taxed at higher wages, even though the real wage may not have increased as much. So this could be seen partly as a inflation adjustment, so that the real taxes paid on these wages are nominal, so are the same, so
right.
Same as what they were earlier.
Sure.
So given these two things, the effect will be on the consumption of this lower segment of population which pays income tax, and undoubtedly what that will mean is a higher consumption. But what has the, let's tie it to the macro first to get the growth effect. So as we we had El Nino two years or so ago, and one had predicted at the beginning of the current year that rural consumption would recover. But what was a little surprise in a sense to because I do my own forecasting, was the slowing down of the urban, and partly due to uncertainties all over the world. But let's leave that aside. The consumption did recover, but it hasn't overall
Sure.
taken together has been recovering from the pandemic, but it has not really gone back to the levels which prevailed before the pandemic. So
Okay.
that is kind of where the effect of this tax reduction will be felt. I expect that this will help consumption go back to that level, and given that the actual implementation of the capital allocation may not have changed, but there was, for various reasons, elections, etc., whatever, a kind of slowing down on the expenditures actually made, that will also recover. And these two things taken together will certainly result in taking growth back to levels which we anticipated before this little downturn in the third quarter.
Right. Dr. Virmani, I want to take you back to something you were just mentioning some time back, that we are using an old definition of defining the poverty line, and then, you know, there are statements coming every fortnight or so that so many have been lifted out of poverty. I want to understand from you, sir, what are the matrices that you use, and how does one define who exactly comprises the middle class and what exactly is the poverty line?
No, I don't think, yeah, I mean, you have to be very careful with the words we use. There are standard international definitions because there's so much controversy about anything we define. I stick to the, just for discussion, I stick to the use of international poverty line. Those are well known, the methods are well known, the translation into from dollars to rupees are well known. They used to be 50 years ago, they were invented. There was the $1, $2, $4 poverty line, which was defined by the World Bank. They have been adjusted for inflation. Now I think the latest version of $1 is $2.15, etc. But just for fixing in your mind, there is no updating as such. The updating always happens as adjustment for inflation happens.
Okay.
So when we say poverty has virtually been eliminated, we are talking about what is now sometimes called absolute poverty, which is the old $1 line translated into current rupees, so to say. The $2 line shows us that the poverty has also gone down dramatically. $2 poverty line. These are standard lines. There is no outdating about it, but we have to be clear which one we are talking about. So in that context, the poverty has gone down over 11 years from roughly 55% to 20%. Okay? So now we can either call it the new poverty line, or we could call it the vulnerable population. So because there is so much confusion in India about what is poverty, what is not, I prefer to call it the vulnerable middle class population. That is why okay? So that also has to be looked after now. We have to shift the focus. That's the main point I'm making here.
Okay.
Let us not keep thinking of the poor in the way we have been doing for 50 years. That poverty is virtually over. Over doesn't mean there's nobody. You know,
the definition has changed.
4 billion people, you'll find 1 million people somewhere in the hills or somewhere. I'm not saying, but there you have to go and find them and do something about it. General policies will not help.
Right, you're right, Dr. Virmani. And there's one more very old definition that we've been using, and a very old structure we've been using, and that is the Income Tax Act. We heard Finance Minister mention today that she would be introducing a new income tax bill as early as next week. So as an economist, you think it's about time to retire the old tax regime altogether?
Very, very important question. Okay, so I retired as CA in 2009. The last meeting I took was on the direct tax code, which as CA I approved from the economic angle before I left. It has been years. There was subsequent committees appointed by Finance Minister Jaitley, etc. It's taken a long time, partly because there are so many different parts in an income tax bill. You have to satisfy, many constituencies. You have to look at the economics. You look at the foreign impact, etc. So this bill is very, very, very important. I cannot understress it. And what the finance minister has given us a hint is that firstly, it will be laid in the House in next week. Secondly, it will reduce the size of the bill by 50%.
Right,
but
make it
It's
simpler.
not just the size. It's the simplification.
Exactly.
And I don't know how else to convey, but I do have a copy of my old, that bill which I mentioned, direct tax code, and it means simplification in everything. Okay. Beyond that, I mean, I don't want to get into details of what is in this bill, but in that old code, the old code had references to section, subsection, clarifications, etc. Hopefully, this new bill is going to get rid of all that cross-referencing, etc., and simplify the definitions, simplify the impact, and in my view, it will have a huge long-term impact on growth.
I'm sure, sir. And another long-term impact that we must consider is by way of the formalization of the gig economy, and as many as 1 crore gig workers likely to benefit with their inclusion in the e-Shram portal. I want to understand from you, Dr. Virmani, this again is a lower income section of society, perhaps is going to not be part of the tax bracket where there is going to be a sizable contribution from them towards contributing to the government's tax kitty. But are there other ways in which you see the gig economy contributing to the larger Indian economy, especially by way of startups that employ them?
So, as you know, this government has from the start put a lot of emphasis on startups. And one of the most egregious tax impositions which was imposed, if I remember, around 2010 when I had just left the finance ministry the last time, and one has been trying to get it removed. Finally, the government removed this, I think in the July, the last budget. So the startup economy is the key. It is the new MSME, you know. Remember, much of the MSME sector is in that 85% informal economy.
Sure.
The future is the formal economy. Every country in the world has much higher, even countries at our per capita level, income level, have higher formal sector. So the startups are the things which are going to drive that. They are also going to drive innovation in every sector, including, for example, fintech, etc. You heard of, insurance.
Right.
So the gig economy is intimately linked to that and to innovations in service tech, so to say. So the challenge is how to do something to make the lives of gig workers more secure and safe in the sense of financially safe,
right,
without killing the innovation which is happening. So
absolutely,
this balance has to be struck. So that is what these things announced in the budget are trying to do, to provide whatever social insurance that the government is trying to provide to other workers, to provide these to gig workers, so that
right,
this innovation system keeps moving, and the gig workers also have a social security net, sure, under their
right,
feet.
You did mention the insurance part, but I'll come to that in just a bit, not for the gig workers, but the FDI on insurance separately. But before that, I want a quick view from you, Dr. Virmani, on GCCs and the focus on Tier 2 cities to become the hub for GCCs, Global Capability Centers. Is Tier 2 in your mind a viable option for GCCs? And I'm a little skeptical as a journalist, Dr. Virmani, because I believe we perhaps don't have the right skill sets and the right education to map with the requirements of GCCs. In fact, it's hard enough to find skilled labor in the key metros. Tier 2 cities, don't you think that's going to be one of the bigger challenges? And how viable really do you think that's going to be?
So, you know, what we understand and hear is that the GCC are already reaching down into the Tier 2 educational systems, the Tier 2 cities, to recruit workers. We also know that the cost of a worker in general is less, because there's a nominal wage and there's a cost. So the cost of living in Tier 2 cities will be much lower. So effectively you can give the same real wage, but much less out of your pocket in terms of nominal wages. So to some extent the GCCs are already doing this by picking people out of the second. So your question is very valid. So what is the intent of the budget? The intent of the budget is to get the states from which they are drawing these recruits and the cities from which they are drawing it to improve the quality of life in these cities, so that these workers don't leave, sure, but the GCCs find it profitable to set up sub-centers in these cities.
But the skills?
So that is the concept behind it, that if, and this is feasible. So what we are trying to do is to remove restrictions, complications, etc., which will keep them from doing it. So it's kind of like a win-win, I mean the classic win-win situation for the state, for its citizens, and for the GCC centers. Now, it's not easy. You are absolutely right. It is not easy. So your question is definitely valid, but I think we must try to get all the states, all the cities to participate in this new service economy, and also I should mention the export part, to facilitate exports, but not just exports, but integration into global supply chains, whether it's at first tier cities or second tier. Eventually they'll have to go down, because I have visited some of these places. They're getting very crowded, not just for service GCCs, but even for industrial plants.
Right. I want to now come to what I said. I'll come to Dr. Virmani, and this is about FDI in insurance. FDI in insurance has been hiked from 74% to 100%. Why was this sector not 100% open for FDI earlier, Dr. Virmani, and what has changed now for us to go up from 74% to 100%, and how will this actually impact the insurance industry?
So, you know, there's one, there's basically been one fear, which is that, and which is addressed in this opening, which is the insurance premiums will be collected from Indian public.
Right.
And what this puts is some kind of a conditionality that the investment from that should be back into the Indian economy. So that's really the fear which this opening actually opens up and gives a signal that it's not because we somehow are fearing that you will have 100% of the equity. We have no fear of that, but we do want the money which is collected, the long-term funds which are collected, to be invested back into long-term investment, which includes infrastructure, etc. But it's up to them where to invest it. But there are lots of opportunities. We are trying to attract sovereign wealth funds, etc. So actually there should be enough opportunities for these insurance companies to invest in India. They just have to get more involved, to think more clearly about the economy, and then they don't have any foreign exchange risk also, which they would have if they have to move back and forth between India and outside investment.
Sure. I want to shift focus now, Dr. Virmani, briefly to manufacturing, and I felt personally that this budget 2025 was a little subdued on the Make in India story, on the manufacturing story. Yes, there were mentions of, let's say, creating toys, clusters and clean technology, but I found that the budget did not really offer a roadmap for India to become competitive, and I really don't understand, do we have a competitive advantage on cost or quality or neither? And is it really the job of the budget in the first place to give a roadmap like that, sir?
See, I think roadmaps in the sense of plans, of course, there's no planning, planning commission was abolished, there's no plans here. I think I've talked to you about this earlier.
Yes, sir.
But the plans now are made by the departments, the ministries, and by the states. Okay, so plan for MSMEs have to come from the MSME department and the heavy industry department. So the budget is not supposed to give you a plan. You may still have complaints, but I'm just trying to put in perspective. So what the budget is trying to do is to identify certain key elements of things which the budget can do to remove obstacles in the way of MSMEs. So there are a lot of regulatory measures, there are support measures about how the export mission, there is a regulatory review commission, there is the Direct Tax Act, which is going to have a big impact on reducing the compliance cost as far as business taxation is concerned. So there's a whole bunch of things. Skilling is absolutely key for driving the growth of MSMEs into the future. So there are all these elements which I think from my perspective actually are the ones which are going to produce results. But perhaps you have something which may still be missing. I'm not, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm running out of time, Dr. Virmani, but before I let you go, I can't help but ask you that that there was so much mention of Bihar in Budget 2025. I want to understand from you, has the budget done justice to the economics of India, or has it done justice to the politics of the party? Your view, sir.
Look, let me answer it in the same spirit. You know, I have watched like 20, 30 budgets in my life, actually sitting in front of the TV and watching. Of course, few of them I was present in Parliament when I was CA. Believe me, in all these budgets, there's always some emphasis on some states for reasons you know very well, I know very well, everybody. So this is not a new occurrence. That's all I would say. You know, the previous budget may have put some perhaps long neglected emphasis on Andhra Pradesh. Perhaps this budget puts a long neglected emphasis on Bihar, but this is something which happens over the years, you know. Some other time there may be an emphasis on another state and so on.
Right. Well, let's leave it at that. Dr. Virmani, always a pleasure having you right here on News 9. And thank you so much for making time and being here with us today.